our always popular across Canada checkup panel with our esteemed guests. If you will kindly come up to the stage and double click on one of the purple chairs that incidentally, we mimicked our co-working innovation space in this 3D immersive environment. And we wanted to create a welcoming environment. We wanted to paint a picture for the possibilities of immersive learning in the future. And it was a collaboration between Hong Kong with Primo, Toronto with our team, and the Netherlands to accomplish what we did today. So we're happy for you to ping us and let us know if you are interested. With some feedback I've already seen, if you can mouse over one of the individuals that you might want to connect to see who's who. If you haven't uploaded your photo, good idea to upload your photo. So we have everyone gathering up on stage. And incidentally, we have Sam Brad, a notable sketch noter from British Columbia, who is on with us today. Hello, Sam, and he will be sketch noting the Cross Canada Checkup Panel. He's donating his time as we are donating the proceeds of today's event to the Connect the North project in support of bridging the gap for Indigenous students in the North. So you are able to make a donation through Eventbrite. If you haven't, up until Saturday, we really want to do our part to give back. So I hope you will join us in giving back as well. With that, I'm going to call upon Peter Singh to be our first presenter from my alma mater, the Toronto District School Board. If our panelists could dim their cameras, please, and microphones. Peter Singh brings 23 years of K-12 sector technology know-how to his role as CTO in the Toronto District School Board. He's been at the forefront of bringing innovation technologies to the TDSB. He is a practitioner of emotional intelligence who is spearheading the TDSB Information Technology Services team from a digital era to quantum age of information technology. I will refer to Peter as a friend. He's been a long-time colleague of ours. We've collaborated on many initiatives in the past. He serves on our CIO National Alliance Board of Advisors. And we're so grateful to have you here, Peter, today to enlighten us on what's happening in your world at the TDSB. Over to you, Peter.
Thank you, Robert, and good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 12th Annual EdTech Leadership Conference. And I know behind the scenes, a lot of hard work goes in putting together wonderful learning days like today. And here at TDS, largest school district in the country, around 250,000 students come to our 582 schools every single day. And we have a overall teacher volume close to 16,000 full-time teachers and close to 9,000 occasional teachers who serve the system itself too. I think what you heard in the keynote from Chris Rusi is a reflective of majority of the work that's happening at TDSB. And just wanted to share the similar things. Calgary is another urban board is experienced. We have exactly similar challenges, and we also see similar opportunities. I think some of the key pieces that might differentiate is that a few weeks back, our trustees actually passed a mandate that every staff member has to be fully vaccinated by a certain date. So I think that has been a little bit different from some of the other school districts, and we at TDSB are now focused on delivering on that ask from our trustees, and asking every staff member to be vaccinated, fully vaccinated, is a challenge. Every organization is going through those challenges. And even this morning, you heard on Toronto media, the TTC came out telling us that they will be short of staff because of the mandate by October 31st. So we will be going through a similar challenge in our side, and we're working very closely with our union partners and our school leaders through principals and system leaders, which includes our business managers, to see how we will maintain the operational side and keep the stability as we go through the vaccination mandate. I think that's a huge, huge challenge. And I wanted to also connect to the earlier speakers around OECD, and they talked about safety and hygiene. That's been a huge focus on TDSB side. I never thought that being a leader, I need to be also fluent on air circulation in the building. So it's some of the things you learn over time as part of your health and safety you needed to provide to your staff. Besides looking after the technology portfolio for the school district, I am also the site person for our East office, which is the traditional Scarborough building. And we have close to 650 individuals who actually call this building their home. So we needed to make sure we prep this building from a safety perspective, also has staff start to come back. So it has its own challenges. It's an old building that was built in 1967. So old buildings have their own challenges when it comes to safety itself too. Some of the things we have seen and learned, and that we wanted to make sure we continue to center our decisions around all voices, and that includes students, parents, and Indigenous elders as part of our strategy. And Chris also highlighted that as part of the Calgary work. And what has really impressed me over last few months to see how much digital fluency the kids have picked up during the pandemic too. And our goal is now to continue to leverage and build on that itself. So with that, I'll take a pause. I know there's going to be more introductions and follow-up questions. We'll continue to have a really healthy discussion. Back to you with that, Robert. John, I don't know if Robert is still on or he's in a different room. So I'll just pass the baton on to somebody else to introduce themselves and move on. So John, you want to go next?
Yeah, thanks, Peter, very much for that. I guess I'm next in.
He's here, but he will fix the voice now.
Yeah. So please go ahead, John, and he will hop on, yeah.
Yeah, thanks very much, Peter. And just as a quick introduction, I'm John Myers. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders at Edsby. And for those of you who perhaps don't know Edsby, we're a Canadian-made solution in the social learning space. So we support school districts and private schools across the country. We've got a focus on a number of areas, including online learning, which is very popular these days for obvious reasons, deep dive in assessment and reporting, and analytics, and most recently we've really been drilling down into student well-being, and we've done some interesting work. I think one of my colleagues, Chris Bessie, just posted something. We've just delivered a new module in the social emotional learning space, and you know, it's some of the items that Robert asked us to touch on here at the start. You know, challenges and opportunities. It really comes down to being nimble and leadership lessons. It's all about being nimble. When COVID hit, it was a massive change for educators, for education organizations. And as a technology supplier into those organizations, that change reverberated onto us as well. Suddenly, things that were important were thrown out the window because a whole new set of things became important. We saw massive increases in bandwidth coming out of our platform as teachers and students now used online platforms like Edsby as their new classroom. And so we were serving up digital content like we couldn't believe. So, you know, certainly challenges in scaling up technology, which were quickly addressed, one of the benefits of being in the cloud. But we were then really excited to drill down into how can we help? How can we help in the new issues that education organizations are facing around student well-being and learning in this new environment of, you know, it may be hybrid, it may be distant, it may be in the classroom, it may be a combination. So those have really put a lot of challenges and opportunities on the table as we've worked closely with a number of our customers to say, how can Edsby help? And so, one of the key lessons is being nimble, I think. And all of us have learned that as the game plan has changed over the last little while, and it continues to change. Even now, we're finding, whether it's simple things like online report cards, so that the paper process no longer needs to be used, to empowering student voice or teacher collaboration in environments where they can't be face-to-face anymore. These are areas that we've always excelled in, and it's been interesting now to drill down more deeply into these because the need for this kind of technology has never been greater. And Robert asked us to talk a little bit about the hope for the future. And as technology people, of course, we see technology as a key part of that part in the future. And I think we're all seeing evidence of that when we look at what Robert's put together to host this particular conference. It's technology that's really enabling this kind of innovative way to communicate and collaborate. And for us, we see the same thing. We see lots of really great ways in which technology can help individual students, groups of students, student-teacher collaboration, bringing parents into the equation so that they can contribute better. These are all the things that we focus on at Edsby, and for us, we see that's a really interesting future as we continue to dive deep in how we can do this for K-12 education organizations.
Thank you
Robert.
so much, John. Are you hearing me okay now?
Yeah, you're good.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. Apologies, my headset battery died on me. So with that, really appreciate your insights and inspiration. John, I'm going to move over to the West, as in Vancouver area, and Patricia Gartland. It has been superintendent of schools for district number 43 Coquitlam since 2015 and is responsible for overseeing BC's third largest school district with 32,000 students and 4,000 employees in over 70 schools and facilities. We hosted there a couple of years ago in one of the state-of-the-art inspirational design schools. Patricia, thank you for joining me this morning, bright and early from Coquitlam.
Well, thank you, Robert, and so nice to see all of you, my colleagues from across Canada this morning, and wonderful to be part of the 12th Canadian International EdTech Summit. Really getting ready for the pandemic. Well, we were getting ready for the future, but we weren't really realizing we were also getting ready for a pandemic. But we started when I took over in 2015 with our Directions 2020 strategic plan, really looking at enhancing learning through technology and cultivating the use of technology to improve teaching and learning. And so that strategic plan, where we wanted to be able to ensure that we had equitable access to technology across our system, and that we were equipping all of our staff with the knowledge, skills, and attitudes to be ready for OECD's Wellbeing 2030, the class of 2030, really paid off when the pandemic hit. And we really wanted to ensure that we were using technology in meaningful ways in all of our classrooms and at all levels, K to 12. And then we were so successful in doing that, that really the pandemic was a wonderful test to see if everything we'd been doing was really coming to fruition. So we had to ramp up very quickly where people who might have been a little slower to adopt suddenly had to adopt right away. So the pandemic helped us in terms of achieving our strategic vision. And so now we have our Directions 2025 strategic plan, which we devised during the pandemic, because why not? You can meet with everyone online. And so technology became a cross-cutting theme that pervades all of our work. And we talk about a focus on quality information, equitable access, and human capacity. And so we really wanted to have a future focus. And I think the future focus with the providing everyone with the skills they need to bring our students into the future is an important part of our success. And so we really have devised some very interesting hybrid models of learning throughout the pandemic. And things like district-wide online lessons where everyone learns together, where a lesson is provided at the district level, and then teachers and support staff and their classes engage online, learn together, and then pursue the activities involved in the lesson in real time in the classroom. And they are also archived and recorded. So we have things like math through Minecraft, and Just Press Play, which is a variety of different STEM activities, literacy and Indigenous connections, and our latest really neat, authentic project is the Student Spaceflight Experiments Program, which is a district-wide STEAM competition where students design microgravity projects and submit those projects to a community review board, and then a project is selected to go on the International Space Station and come back to us. And we had done that in 2016 as well. So we're doing it again in 2021, and it creates a lot of excitement for students in grades 4 to 12 throughout our system. With our district-wide themes like Math Through Minecraft, we combine digital and physical learning, and we provide multimedia lessons that are archived. We also have a fantastic website that has all kinds of materials for staff to use, and we provide extension materials for teacher use. We also do a lot of professional development throughout our system. So we meet every 2 weeks with all of our principals and vice principals and go over not only the health and safety guidelines that we're all struggling with, and that Peter mentioned some of those, but also professional development opportunities, learning without boundaries meetings with focus and with breakout sessions where everyone can collaborate. We also have professional development for all of our staff throughout the year, and really in this environment, the necessity for virtual meetings has really facilitated more frequent meetings and more participation, and I'm sure you've all experienced that. We also have a pedagogical help desk, which I've mentioned before, where people can get just-in-time, educators can get just-in-time help with whatever issues they have regarding the use of technology. We developed a system-wide approach where we focus on Office 365 so that everyone's working with the same tools and we can collaborate across our district in that way. Help desk, there's all kinds of levels and a triage of needs, and we have technology support teachers who go out to schools and work with schools very closely in mentoring teachers and supporting teachers. And we've heard that many of our staff who really were afraid of using technology have found how technology really allows students to take a stronger participatory and leadership role in the classroom and work collaboratively using technology and other real devices in the classroom to achieve their vision. They've learned skills for the future regarding teamwork, collaboration, cooperation, and so on. And so we found that really the pandemic was an opportunity in terms of our vision to give the students the core competencies that they need. And of course, that required tremendous resourcing and a tremendous focus of our resources on technology in support of teaching and learning. We also have Tech 20 presentations that our director, our Chief Information Officer, Stephen Whiffen, provides at every second board meeting to keep our leaders and the Board of Education focused on what we're achieving. And that can be practical things like digitizing all of our documents, or it can be our focus on STEAM and the STEAM activities that we're doing throughout our system. We also find that assistive technology tools through Office 365, like closed captioning, immersive reader, voice-to-text software, and presentation tools are very helpful for our vulnerable students or students with learning challenges. And we are able through technology to collect data in a way that we never have before and use data in a meaningful way to inform our practice and to inform the practice of all our educators. So really the key is to build a reliable and sustainable infrastructure based on a strong shared strategic vision, provide equitable access, identify priorities at each level. So we can't focus on everything if we're going to do well. So really a continuum of learning from K to 12 with benchmarks for those areas of learning. Develop standards in terms of the infrastructure as well, and not have old devices and a variety of devices, but ensure that we're able to always have the most current technology. And also digital resources are the key, all kinds of digital resources that really enhance and immerse students in learning in a way that we weren't able to do with simple pen and paper textbooks. And then understand how technology can develop digital citizens and empower learners, and encourage, above all, innovation and hybrid learning to impact learning for the future. So we really are embracing the idea of preparing students for not just the class of 2030, but for the world of the 21st century, and having our students follow the OECD's idea of being independent learners who can navigate the world and achieve the goal of well-being. And so thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning. And I just love hearing from my colleagues, and thank you, Robert, for building this cross-Canada network, which is so important to our success and our collaboration as leaders.
Thank you so much for your time and kind words, Patricia. Gartland, I hope you can stay with us, and we'll field some questions afterwards. Next up, we're going to skip back across to Ontario to Contact North. Maxim Jean-Louis is the president and CEO of Contact North. Contact North, Ontario's distance education and training network, headquartered in Thunder Bay, Ontario. Maxim has worked in senior management roles for over 15 years at Athabasca University in Alberta, Canada's Open University. Also is a member of this comité consultant, testing my French, Maxim, en matière éducation postsecondaire en anglais, français, dans la région du centre du Sud-Ouest. Maxim is former chair of the board of directors of the World University Service of Canada and of the Optical Region Advanced Network of Ontario. He has over 100 locations that serve the marginalized throughout Ontario, and it's tremendous challenges, and he is embracing all of that and enabling online learning, inspiring future leaders. Maxim, thank you so much for joining us today from the North. You're looking fit as always, as he gets out on a regular basis as well to look after his own well-being. Thank you, and over to you, Maxim.
Robert, it's a distinct pleasure. Let me echo what Patricia just said, that we are also grateful to you for weaving this network across the nation, across the country. I think it is so useful. Robert, yes, I work at Contact North, but what I'd like to do is to talk about two things that are happening in Ontario. One is that there are 4 million Ontarians who are in remote and rural Ontario, and we observe a tremendous spike in student registrations under COVID-19 to the tune of 180,000 registrations. So, Robert, it seems that the residents of Ontario who are in small, rural, remote, Indigenous and Francophone communities accelerated their move towards online learning and taking courses, leading to jobs, because it's very much part of the economic recovery in the province. Let me jump for a second to Ontario. I think, Robert, is most likely the single most generous province in terms of funding special initiatives in online learning. No less than $50 million the government has invested in the last 18 months in providing support for 400 projects by Ontario's colleges and universities, ranging from test bedding innovation, finding a way to help foreign students to continue their studies using online learning while in fact completing programs in colleges and universities in Ontario, micro-credentials, and I could go on. What I'm observing is really those two things, that the people who are marginalized, who are disenfranchised, who are underserved in those 1,300 communities plus are definitely, if you like, growing their participation in online learning. And I think it's going to continue. But also the university and the colleges and the government are working hand in hand in terms of test bedding innovation. I think that we're going to need a bit of consolidation in Ontario because there is a lot that we need to do and we are going to do in terms of training faculty, in terms of scaling experiments. So therefore we can benefit a larger group of individuals. But this seems to be very much on the way. eCampus Ontario, I should mention, has been a very, very valuable asset to all of us in terms of helping the government distribute and invest in those 400 projects so far. Robert, to give you a sense of how the marginalized and how online learning helps the marginalized in Ontario, but elsewhere in the country, we are literally, I'm on my way to Timmins, where we are going to be in about 3 weeks, we are going to open an online learning center in a homeless shelter. Imagine that kind of a online learning, working with Ontario Works, working with Contact North to help the people who are homeless, literally coming to those shelters to start getting their feet wet into online learning and education. So it bodes well. There are challenges. I think the biggest challenge, Robert, is in making sure we provide faculty with, I think, what are the 3 T's, as I always say: the technology, the training, but most importantly, the time. Without those 3, you cannot really move forward in terms of supporting faculty. Over to you, Robert.
Thank you,
Whether we lost you.
Tim. It is my honor to introduce our next presenter, Dr. Rumeet Billan, award-winning, internationally recognized entrepreneur, learning architect, speaker, author, humanitarian, and Canada's top 10 power women in 2020. Rumeet, thank you so much for joining us this morning, and we're looking forward to your inspiration. We'll talk this morning. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Robert. Thank you to everyone who's joining today and to the panelists. It's great to be here. You know, over the last 595 days, I've been speaking a lot about mental health, resilience, trust, and belonging. And yes, friends, it has been exactly 595 days since the World Health Organization declared that what it is that we are experiencing is a pandemic. And over those 595 days, you and I, we've gone through a lot. Our students have gone through a lot. Our family members, those that we love and those that we care about. Because you see, we've got the COVID-19 pandemic, but we've also got the echo pandemic related to our well-being, our mental health, our emotional health, our physical health. And not just that, we've had all these heartbreaks and tragedies from around the world or in the States or even in our own backyard. We've experienced a lot. We know that women have experienced a pandemic differently than men, and it's not about men versus women. It's what the statistics are saying. We know there's been an increase in gender-based violence. We know there's been an increase in racism and discrimination. And we know about the lack of inequitable access that's always been there, but amplified during this time. And I start off by talking about that because all of this impacts how you and I, how our students show up every single day. And it has been challenging. There's a lot that's happened. There's a lot that's still happening, and it impacts us. And when we think about leadership lessons, when we think about the last 595 days, what I have learned in my experience working with kindergarten students all the way to administrators in North America, in Canada, as well as the States, and CEOs of multi-billion-dollar companies, that there are 3 things that are incredibly important. Number 1, practical empathy. We often talk about this notion of empathy, but let's talk about practical empathy. Let's also talk about trust, because I would humbly suggest that the current state of trust is in a state of crisis. Whether we're talking about trust, whether we trust the media, whether we trust how organizations and how school boards and schools have responded to mental health challenges among youth or their teachers or staff or administrators, whether we talk about trust with certain communities and police officers, right? Or politics. We can look at this from a macro level or a micro level. But trust absolutely has been in a state of crisis, but I'd also humbly suggest that there are huge opportunities for us, and regardless of our role, whether we're an administrator working in education, a teacher, we have huge opportunities to earn trust. And this concept of belonging, that's number 3, has also been critical during this time. It always has, but even more so now. And when we look at things like social connectedness, and you might say to me, it's been 595 days, we've been isolated, there's been a lot that's happened, but if you look at the actual definition of what social connectedness is, it is that experience, the feeling, the moments of belonging. And when we think about belonging, it's not about inviting everyone to the table. Oh, I'm going to invite everyone to the conversation. We want to hear different perspectives. Belonging is about what happens at the table. You can invite everyone all you want, but when they get to the table, are they silenced? Are they ignored? Or are they accepted? Are they listened to? Are they included? I love this quote by Arthur Chan. It's quite popular out there, where it says, diversity is a fact. Inclusion is an action, equity is a choice, and belonging is an outcome. And I'd respectfully edit that, because at the basis of an outcome is an experience. And what I would suggest is that belonging is an experience. And for all of us, whether we're looking at our peers, colleagues, friends, family, students, I think a big piece and a big lesson is to ensure that we are catching other people's vulnerability, especially during this time, because we have no idea what someone else has gone through. There may be people that you interact with that have gone through trauma over the last 595 days, and you just might not know. We don't know what happens in between the four walls of someone's home. But what we can do is we can attempt to catch others' vulnerability. And that doesn't mean that I know sometimes people get worried about this word vulnerability. It doesn't mean you need to share your deepest, darkest secrets or share what you are experiencing if you don't want to. A simple vulnerability tactic, which comes from Daniel Coyle's work, is saying, thank you for sharing. And so when I think about hope for the future, I don't need to look far. I can look at all of you. I can look at our students. 595 days ago, you and I had to change the way we do essentially everything, even grocery shop, the way we teach, learn, connect, communicate, live. And we did it. And I'm not saying it was the most optimal or the best case scenario, but what I'm saying is we did it. We relied on our strengths, our ability to get through those challenges, whether it's a year and a half ago or the ones that we're facing today. So when I think about hope for the future, I'm looking right at it. And that, I think, is incredibly powerful. So thank you so much again for having me. I'm truly enjoying listening to the other panelists. Robert, I'm going to hand it back over to you.
Rumeet, thank you so much for those inspiring words. Next up, we're going to introduce Steve Brown, who is the president and CEO of Nelson. Steve Brown has made his mark in Canada and internationally by leading organizations through digital transformation. His career spans a diverse mix of industry and technology experience, from multimedia entertainment, logistics services, automotive, and now learning solutions. His passion and commitment to transforming education and student learning experience continues to fuel the innovation pipeline at Nelson. Thank you for joining me this morning. Steve, over to you.
Thank you, Robert. Good morning, everybody. It's great to be see so many familiar friends and faces on the screen in front of me. Rather than talk about what we've been doing at Nelson, so I'm hopeful that most of you know what we've been doing as we've sort of led our digital transformation. I want to bring up some contrarian views, to bring some views for perhaps some reflection and thought about what we have ahead of us. Rumeet just talked about the 595 days behind us. John mentioned earlier about the task that Robert talked to us about, our hope for the future. Hope is not a management technique. Hope bears no product. Hope does not deliver anything, but we have to be intentional about what we do. And when we talk about what's happened behind us, and I think it, first of all, would be remiss if I didn't thank the educators across this country, the students across the country, the administrators in education across the country for what they did, because they truly rose to a task the likes of which no one has seen since perhaps the Second World War, certainly in this country and in most Western countries around the world. But I have a contrarian view, and my view is for the leaders, it's not behind us. For leaders, the true task of your leadership lies ahead of you, because my 5 years in education has taught me many things, one of which is muscle memory and the ability to return to that cozy place under the blanket of past practices. And as leaders, we have to make sure that we do not recoil back to that blanket of past practice, because the changes that have happened in the last 595 days have been for the better. They have moved education along and accelerated technology in the classroom, perhaps 10 years. My fear is, which is the absolute opposite of hope, but my fear is that past practice and teaching memory will revert, which will push us back some degree of that 10 years. So we need to hold that. And it was interesting listening to Maxim, Jean-Louis talking about marginalized communities and connectivity. We as the educational community of this country must unite in our voices. We must speak loudly about racialized and marginalized communities, because technology in education should be agnostic to location. Whether you're in the classroom or in the kitchen, you should be able to learn and go through the same pedagogical access that you can in the classroom. But we know that that's not the case, because connectivity across Canada is still not where it should be. And the sad part about that is data costs in Canada are the most expensive in the world. And shame on us, Canada, for being the most expensive in the world. And people talk about the geographic spread, and that's why that we cannot get connectivity, which will enable learning in any corner of this country. And that, I say, is nonsense. The only barrier to connectivity in Canada is the sheer greed of the telecoms, because the cost of connectivity has nothing to do with geographic location. It purely comes from the greed of telecoms being able to control a society, and we must speak about that in education. Another item I'd like to bring up, which again may be somewhat contrarian, is I actually think that when we look back on this, and this will be a generational reflection, we will look back on this, and I know that this will probably bring a lot of concern and you know, alternate views to my point, but one day we will look back and say, these were the good old days. And that is somewhat contrarian, as I've said, but mark my words, students of this period will be the greatest leaders of the last 70 years. From this period of adversity through a global pandemic, you will see leaders of the educational community, of provinces, of companies, and countries around the world, because through adversity, the pressure that puts on, and pressure only creates two products. Pressure in society creates two things. Pressure overall creates only two byproducts, diamonds or dust. And we will see diamonds come from this period of the last 595 days, because diamonds have been made. They have managed to learn, to alter, and to be able to create leaders of the future. But more importantly than ever, let us not go back. Let us create an equitable solution for the classroom and for education globally. let us not hope, but lead. And with that, we can truly make this 595 days, as Rumeet has told us, something that has driven product, that has had byproduct, and that will be to take this nation's global rankings of the OECD rankings as being the highest ranking English speaking country, and let us not be settled at being ranked at number 7 or number 8 in the OECD PISA rankings, but let us move up those rankings and let us lead the world agnostic to any language. And with that, Robert, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you, Steve Brown. Always thought-provoking and inspirational words. Really appreciate your time this morning. Next up, we're going to go a little bit global beyond the cross-Canada checkup to Lisa Schmucki, who is the founder and CEO of EdWeb. It is an award-winning professional learning network that serves the global education community. EdWeb helps educators share their best ideas and practices to improve teaching and learning and preparing students to be successful in their lives. Lisa is a global thought leader. She's part of the SIIA Education Network, has been an advisor to ERDI in the US, and is a graduate of Princeton and holds a master's degree from the Stern School of Business at NYU, one of my favorite cities to visit, and I hope to get back there soon. Over to you, Lisa.
Robert, thank you so much. Thank you for this invitation to participate on the panel and to hear more about cross collaboration around Canada. And, you know, we are doing that around the world. I must say, I didn't read the directions. I actually brought some slides. Do you want me to share my screen and use them as some talking points going through here? Is that okay, Robert?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, all right. Let me see if I can do that and go over here. Okay, can you all see that? Okay, great. So I founded EdWeb 13 years ago as a free social network for collaboration and professional learning. And we've grown to 1.2 million educators in 185 countries. Canada is the second country after the United States. And it's been so wonderful to listen to all of you. Like Patricia, I love what you said about professional learning without boundaries. We're limited to planet Earth right now, but we have learned that all across the globe, I think the common theme that comes to my mind is that we're better together. And hearing, you know, all of you talk about, like Chris earlier, talking about some of the collaboration across the system without boundaries, and you know, Rumeet, how you've talked about how that kind of collaboration can create trust and belonging. Those are all things that are so important right now. And the technology, Steve, you also now talking about the importance of that connectivity, right? So it is really important that this collaboration can grow faster and be better thanks to tech if you have the tech. So we do have to put that in the hands of everyone, and it's never been more important than with the challenges of COVID. So one of the things that I thought about 10 years or over 10 years ago when we started was how much talent there is within the community of educators, but also within the education itself, and that we really need to bring the industry and educators together more so that the solutions and services that are created for educators can be the best they can be by collaborating better with educators. So that's part of our mission, and every day we see the impact of professional learning and collaboration. So just, you know, some data to show how fast communities are growing. We grew 60% during the pandemic, the size of our community, and I think others are sharing similar or even greater statistics for how their communities are growing. The other thing that we see is that you never run out of topics in education. So we can begin, you know, so Rumeet, you talked about inviting everybody to the table. There are lots of tables that we can set on so many different topics in education and bring folks in. And I think we've experienced that in virtual collaboration, people feel easier, feel it's easier for them to participate and feel like they do belong at those tables. And then the other thing that I thought was really going to be interesting to share is the top programs that we host webinars on our network. We do 400 live ones of those a year. We have 2,500 recorded. We had over 1 million views of our programs last year, but just this year, these are the top topics. And as I pulled this last night, I think we can also see how much we're dealing with social emotional issues, trauma, the importance of mindfulness. Play has come up several times in here, play and leisure, so that we're incorporating that into everything that everyone is dealing with. And then language as well. So, a bilingual virtual classroom so that we can have students who are speaking so many different languages now and moving all around the globe so rapidly that their needs can be addressed. This again is just showing how rapidly online learning is growing for us. And I know you're all seeing that as well. We give certificates for everyone coming to our webinars, and we do that on 100 topics. In the United States, they can use them for their state teacher license renewal. It's all free, so that's a great advantage to them. But we do see that educators all around the world like to get a certificate that shows their learning. And this is just, kind of a testament to our goal of working with education companies to help support all of the services we provide for educators are free, and it's they help us recruit all the presenters, and it's really thanks to their networks. It's really like a crowdsourced model of bringing educators together to share their best practices. So we're very happy that we're able to pull this together to support the kind of collaboration that we do. And we've been spending a lot of time talking with the Georgia Department of Education in the United States, who's used EdWeb as a hub for virtual collaboration for 5 years now. And it was more important than ever during this crisis. And we really just want to try to document how the best leaders and practitioners who are using these kinds of networks are doing it, and doing it in the best possible way so that we can share that information for others to use. So that's just a little bit of what we're doing and some of the success we found, and how much I'm hearing it echo with everything you all have been talking about this morning.
Thank you so much, Lisa Schmucki. I'm honored to introduce our next Cross Canada Checkup presenter, Eric Walters, award-winning Canadian author. It all began in 1993 when Eric was teaching a grade 5 class in the Peel District School Board. He began to write and encourage his students to become more involved in literature. His first novel, Stand Your Ground, was created for this class, and it's just down the street from our co-working innovation space here in Mississauga. It's set in the school where Eric was teaching, Vista Heights Public School, and some of the features of the community of Streetsville and many of the names of the students were incorporated in the story, which inspired many more books. Since the first novel, Eric has exploded on the children's and young adult scene over the past 2 decades. He has published 104 more novels and picture books, with 8 more scheduled and forthcoming. He was recently awarded the Governor General Award for Literature, and informed me just yesterday he is nominated for the Alma Award, the Astra Linden Memorial Award, which is the biggest children's literature award in the world. I know he's also built schools, which we've donated to in Africa. He has presented to over 1.5 million students across North America and internationally. And he presents to the K-12 students as well, adult groups, and has been a keynote speaker on a variety of conferences. He's been very generous of his time, and also is a past basketball coach. It's interesting to note that. Eric, thank you so much for your your participation on this panel today. Over to you.
Thank you very much. I actually had yours just to simply say, I'd like to hear Steve talk some more, or can we go back to Rumeet for another 2 minutes? I wanted an hour from all of you, and I was a little disappointed when the 5 minutes stopped. I had to avoid just making comments and just saying, I'd like to talk about this that this person said or this, but I'm going to just say one thing. When Steve talked about marginalized people, the greatest marginalization, I think, is economic disadvantage right now. People across cultural, racial lines who have no access to computers, the internet. These are the people who are suffering the most during the pandemic. They've slid farther down. The disparity between the haves and the have-nots has become so profound, and that's been something I've noticed as I've been presenting across North America, around the world. Besides being a teacher, I spent my entire career in the appeal board. I have a master's in social work. I'm a trained family therapist. My first 25 books are written for my class. My classes typically were 28 boys, 28 kids, 24 boys, and they really didn't like reading and writing. That's why I started writing for them. I do presentations across schools and libraries across Canada, throughout North America, around the world. Over the past 20 years, I've done about 12,000 presentations. When the pandemic was declared and schools were locked down, I did the logical thing. I postponed my scheduled presentations for 3 weeks because, well, this COVID thing wasn't going to last any longer than that. Spoiler alert, I was slightly wrong. It was time for what became my favorite and least favorite word of the pandemic, pivoting. The other phrases are, your mic is not on and can you hear me? Those are the words that are spoken around the world continually. I turned my office into a studio with a gigantic background, 3-point lighting, including a ring light and drop boxes, a microphone most radio stations would love to have, a gigantic second monitor, sound baffles, a high definition camera, and of course, a Rubbermaid stool to put my computer on. That's the most important thing, is the Rubbermaid stool. Now properly equipped, I started to do virtual visits using 7 different platforms, and I think this is my 8th. It's a very nice platform, by the way. I did over 250 virtual visits and talked to about 45,000 students. These students were in schools, but also in home settings with schools closed down. There was a second initiative I became part of. With my friend and fellow writer, Singh, we decided to launch a webinar series. Every second week, we brought on guests and worked around themes. We had the top-selling, best-known illustrators and writers in the country. In addition, we had NHL and NBA players, a spoken word poet, a country singer, and such inspirational people as Dr. Captain Canada Haley Wickenheiser and Terry Fox's older brother, Fred. Some of these webinars, we had up to 75 schools and 20,000 students join us at once. We had schools in some webinars in 8 provinces from Gunner Harbor, Newfoundland to Victoria. We also did a few things with these webinars. We insisted on paying our guests. We asked schools to pay a fee to be part of it. And we protected the intellectual property of our guests by saying they can see it live or they can see a recorded version for 1 week that's non-downloadable. We believe people need to get paid for what they're doing. Now, as a writer, I get emails from my readers, hundreds and hundreds a month, and I answer all of them. I kept getting emails saying, are you going to write about the pandemic? And I kept saying, no, didn't want to. But I started to realize there were common elements in these emails. These young people were unsure, uncertain, and had limited information, were scared what was happening. They were in a situation that none of them or their parents or their grandparents had ever experienced. As a writer, I thought I could help in my own small way. Besides, with all the actual presentations and travel stuck in lockdown, I really had some time on my hands. I contacted one of my publishers, Orca, and spoke to the owner of the company. I told him I have an idea about a book. I had a condition. I wanted the book to reach its audience quickly. For the book to be helpful for kids coming through the pandemic, it needed to come out during the pandemic. I suggested we get the book written, edited, promoted, and digitally published within 40 days. That's such a nice ring to it, 40 days and 40 nights. By the way, the usual process is between 400 and 600 days, so I was talking about 12 times faster. We met in a Zoom session, all the employees of Orca. This was going to take a full company commitment. The normal way things are done is consecutively. A story is written, edited, catalog prepared, publishing scheduled, printed, shipped, promoted. We didn't have time for consecutive. We did all of it at the same time simultaneously. The book is called Don't Stand So Close to Me. It wasn't the original title, but we brainstormed it. My primary role is to write the book. This was only one of my roles. I wanted this book to have the biggest, most complex, multifaceted launch a Canadian children's book had ever had. I made contacts so the book had a trailer being created. I wrote a novel study, got a website to launch it, got coverage in CTV News, an article in the Toronto Star, an interview on CBC, a blog to cover it, a podcast, and arranged for a TikTok. I arranged for the TikTok. I didn't actually do it. The goal was for the book to come out in 40 days. We failed. It took 41. The 40th day when it was supposed to come out was Blackout Tuesday. That morning, we pulled everything we had so we wouldn't interfere with Black Lives Mattered. We launched the book the next day. This book came out digitally on June 4th. It came out on paper September 15th and went to second print on September 17th. I've never read a book go second print that fast. It's been translated. I've received emails from teachers and students telling me how much the book meant to them, how it was comforting to the students. Teachers actually did the experiments I did in the book around flattening the curve and exponential growth and told me their students understood them. Ironically, at the same time, some of our elected officials didn't seem to grasp these concepts. It was a shame that I didn't read the book. During the pandemic, I also had 5 other books published in the traditional manner. They were written and in the publishing pipeline. I've been asked if I'd consider writing another book this way. I spoke to my publisher and told him if I ever call him again suggesting something like this, he should immediately hang up on me and change his phone number. Thank you. And back to Robert.
Round of applause for our panel of presenters here. You can click on the bottom right icon there, delegates. Thank you so much for the inspiration. Eric, I have to ask you, what drives your passion to write? You're prolific. I'm working on my first book, and I was hoping to deliver it for this summit, and I missed my deadline because I got a few other things going on.
Writing is just fun. And that's one of the things, being a teacher and a writer, teaching is constantly giving. And writing is a pretty selfish endeavor. So I'm not doing anything remarkable. I'm just playing with words. The people are out there on the front lines, the writer, the teachers, the administrators, those are the people doing the real work.
Thank you for that. Is it our challenge? Is it education's challenge to find that spark in every student? Is because Eric, you seem to have found that secret sauce, that secret recipe in engaging boys when you wrote your first book. How can we do a better job at helping kids at a young age develop to their full potential? Because it's critical to be competent in literacy at a young age, because that makes an impact when you come into education. What can we do better? How do we accomplish that? I like to say it takes a digital village to raise a child in the 21st century. If you come in behind, when you enter school, there's a lot of catching up, and it isn't a level playing field. How do we achieve that?
A good start would be to have this panel should simply go to every school board in the country and address the teachers. That'd be an awfully good way to start. The things I've been told today, I just sat back in awe listening to these presenters. That's where I'd like to start things. Let's take this on the road.
Wow. Eric, I love your perspective, and thank you for enlightening us in understanding that our words, our collective words, are so powerful. And that's part of the inspiration in doing this on an annual basis. We started some 12 years ago in a classroom at York University. Anyone want to tackle that question that I just asked besides Eric? Okay, so I think we're all on the same page, and we want to take this on the road and perhaps a roadshow in the future. Dr. Rumeet Billan.
Hi.
As much as this is a technology summit, it's so much more than that. How do we balance? You unplugged this summer, and kudos to you for that. Talk to us about that balance, that struggle, and the importance of, Chris Usi talked earlier about disconnecting on weekends as much as he can, because we do need to be mindful of our well-being as leaders.
So I'm going to talk about balance. I don't know if I like that word necessarily, but to your previous question about with children and in the classroom, I think emotional and social learning is so incredibly important. Learning emotional regulation, all of these things are incredibly important at a very young age. Now, in terms of balance, I will say to you, I'm not balanced because given my context and my circumstance, I have a 5-year-old son. I wake up at 3:45 in the morning. I work from 4 a.m. to 7 a.m. before he wakes up. And when he was home from school, when he was home, and it's him and I. And so to some people, that might not be balanced to be waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning and working until 7 a.m., but that's what worked best for me. Now, I did sleep at 8 p.m. I got my 8 hours of sleep. But for me, recharging was at that time versus weekends or during the day. And so when we think about this concept and notion of balance, I encourage all of everyone on this call today to think about what works best for you, given your context and your circumstance. Some people do yoga, some people meditate. That may work for them, but I know for me, that doesn't work for me. Being active, going out for walks works for me, and that might not work for you. So it is highly context specific when we look at this notion of balance. Recharging is important, but it's during the times that are best for you.
I just want to contribute to that conversation. Steve Brown, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I generally have thoughts on most things, Robert.
I know, that's why I asked.
I'll go back to your question about level playing fields with students. I think that the first interaction with students is to start with a positive and not a negative. And when you start talking about level playing fields being not there, being unlevel playing fields, it's a negative start. And when we talk about learning gaps, it's a negative. So I think talking about student engagement and listening to what they enjoy and listening to what Eric talked about, meeting students where they're at, it's an individual learning journey and giving them the ability to be able to take a positive about their journey. Because there are two spirals in learning, and I've seen this over the last 2 years where you see student disengagement, and I keep saying they're not disengaging, they're re-engaging in something other than learning. So if you can make that learning journey an engaging one for them in any way that they choose to learn, they will stay engaged longer rather than re-engaging in something else. So let's be there to give students a methodology in learning that speaks to them. And when we do that, those gaps will get closed. But when you start identifying a gap or an unlevel playing field, you're marginalizing that individual student, telling them that they're not quite as good as other students. And they're not as good or worse, they're just different. There is no right and wrong in learning, it's just a journey. And if you can keep them engaged, engagement will bring outcomes, and outcomes will bring those diamonds I spoke about a little earlier.
Well said. Any other thoughts to share, John Myers?
Yeah, just some thoughts on that. I think it's bang on. These recent changes have greatly impacted how individual students learn. And some are flourishing in this environment. Some love it. Some find it's better than ever. I have a 16-year-old son. He thinks this is fantastic. He's grown up on the internet. YouTube University is his go-to. He spends hours and hours learning and drilling down deeply on things at school. Like this is just magic for him. But there are other kids who, this doesn't work. They miss the classroom environment. They miss that face-to-face. They're not feeling motivated. And I think this is where a number of the speakers, and I touched on it as well, the importance of understanding each individual student's perspective through this, where they are, their social emotional status and feeling, and are they ready to learn or not learn? That's just so crucial these days, because it was easier in the past when the teacher could look out across those 22 students and kind of see the ones who were not engaged and the ones who are. But as things have moved to more of a virtual environment, even if the kids are going face to face, the teacher doesn't have those same insights in which students are engaging, which ones aren't. So it's just such a crucial area right now, is to understand each individual student, where they're at, and what can be done to help them with their own individual learning journey.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, John. We just recently shared a KPMG report that was done for the post-secondary level, highlighting that students want learning to evolve more so around their digital workflow, right? So it's so important to be mindful of how students are interfacing with technology. There's a famous professor from the University of Toronto, Marsh McLuhan, who talked about we create the technology and the technology shapes us, right? So we need to kind of keep control. As you know, I look at how I interface with technology. Sometimes it gets the better of me, if you will. So some definite challenges there. And speaking of challenges, we had Sam Brad, if he can join us on the virtual stage, has been sketchnoting this Cross Canada Checkup panel this morning, and he's going to share his screen and enlighten us with the highlights of what he's captured. So Sam generously donated his time in support of, wow, look at that. That is so impressive. I'm going to get a copy for each of our presenters and frame that for you. Sam, perhaps you can say a few words and talk about how you were inspired in your creation this morning. It's beautiful, by the way. It's stunning.
Thank you so much. It's really an honor to be even in the room with such esteemed speakers. And so I'm hoping that this graphic will help remind people who were here about these important themes, and also to ignite that spark for other folks who are also on this learning journey around educational technology. And so some of the things that I was capturing, I'll just go back to the kind of the beginning of the panel, talking about how digital fluency has increased, the need to stay nimble. Really early on in this panel, we talked about the importance of connecting marginalized communities and making sure that their learning needs are also being met. We heard about being ready for the future, that it's going to include having the knowledge, the skills, and the attitude. And then speaking of attitudes, you know, mental health has been this massive echo in the pandemic, but it's not just about an individual response, it's also about the structural inequities. And so I've drawn this little person kind of sitting on a fractured ground. But then from that fractured ground, we have some resilience, and the strategies around resilience are around practical empathy, trust, and belonging. And then when we talk about what's created from conditions of pressure, this idea of diamonds or dust, and then setting an intention for how we're going to lead under those conditions. So speaking of leading, it's about setting that vision. We heard from School District 43, setting a vision of equity, keeping a strong structure and keeping it up to date, making sure there's unique collaborations, empowering staff and learners, and always this idea of giving back.
Sam, thank you so much. Let's have an awesome round of applause for our Cross Canada panel and Sam Brad, who really captured the essence of this wonderful, inspirational, insightful panel. You see all the hands applauding. And Sam, and you captured this, you did not do this on paper, you did this digitally with a certain device. Perhaps you can just say a quick word about that. That's incredible.
Totally. Oh, thanks so much. Yeah, so I began, today it's digital, so you can kind of see at the top, it says Photoshop. So I'm working on a big Wacom tablet. You can work on almost any kind of digital tool. I do this every day for my job, and so I have a big one. And what it allows me to do is just use digital ink and then hit one button and everybody can see. In the before times, you'd probably see me on paper, but I gotta say, yeah, I'm also adapting and loving my new workflow.
Well, thank you again for that. And Dr. Leslie Wilton, I've got a one by Wacom tablet. She's been tweeting profusely using the hashtag Canadian EdTech 21. So please CDN EdTech 21 to win more prizes. And next up, we have our break. But before we go to our networking break, we have a health break with Janet Olmstead, who is the author of the playbook, How to Get in the Habit of Good Health. We're giving this to all our presenters to express our gratitude, and we are giving a bunch of books away. So continue to tweet. Janet is going to come up on stage now. There's 150 tips here on how to get in the habit of good health. I'm from the participation era. I actually worked with participation in my previous life. I studied sport administration. So it's embedded in my DNA that get out there and get active on a daily basis. But with that, let's have one more round of applause for Sam Brad and the Cross Canada Checkup crew. I hope you can stay around for a bit and address some meet some of the folks around the virtual tables. Double click to get back to the tables, and I'm going to stop sharing, and I'll be back momentarily and introduce our next presenter, Janet Olmstead.